Did they get started? Yeah. You got things? Okay. You got it?
Is that it? I think that's it.
There, it's on.
Okay, great, thank you.
Can we give you the tell me what it is?
Okay. Probably not. We'll just let people get seated and yeah.
No, they're first.
Okay. Okay.
Then we have our
All right. Okay.
There's
Looks like we got ready. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay.
Welcome. If I could get everyone to have a seat, we will get our program. You're seated. We'll get our program started. Welcome on behalf of the Brisbane Chamber of Commerce, and a big thank you for the League of Women Voters for putting this event on this evening. And I would like to introduce Kathy Tyson, who will be moderating the event. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to a forum on Measure B. Measure B is an advisory measure that affects the city of Brisbane. Tonight you will be hearing arguments from the pro side and from the con side. Representing the pro side, we have Owen Poole and Jill. And on this side we have the con side, Michelle Salmon, and I've forgotten Philip Batchelder. So you'll be hearing from both groups. The way this is going to work is I'm going to read the ballot measure as it appears on the ballot. Then I will read the impartial analysis. From there, we will do the argument in favor of Measure B. That will take about 15 minutes. There will be a 5-minute rebuttal, and then we will change and go to the con argument with their 15-minute, then another 5-minute rebuttal. After that, we will be taking written questions from the audience. I do have 2 ushers wearing the League of Women Voters badges. If you could pass your questions to them, they will make sure they get up to the sorting table. Okay. And with that, why don't we get started? Measure B. The question before the voters is, should the City Council grant permits and approvals that would change the existing use of the Guadalupe Valley Quarry to allow a proposed residential development consisting of 102 single-family units, 16 live-work units, 32 artist lofts, and 23 granny units. The measure shall be binding upon the property owner and the city. That's the question before the voters. The City Attorney of Brisbane has written an impartial analysis. You can find that in your voters pamphlet when it comes. This is what it says. Measure B seeks voter approval of a proposed residential development of the Guadalupe Valley Quarry, the quarry. The quarry is located in an unincorporated area of the County of San Mateo and is presently operating as a quarry under a surface mining permit issued by the county. The 1994 Brisbane General Plan provides for the quarry to be annexed to the city and redeveloped for commercial use, similar to Crocker Industrial Park. The property owner has instead applied to the city for approval of a residential development consisting of 102 single-family units, 16 live-work units, combined residence and small business space, 32 artist lofts, combined residence and studio space, and 23 carriage or granny units attached to 23 of the single-family homes. The project will also include a community facility, public park, open space areas dedicated for endangered species habitat, financial contributions to the school district and the city for public facilities and affordable housing, and future homeowner payments for the Habitat Conservation Plan. Because the project involves residential use of the quarry property instead of the commercial uses anticipated by the general plan, the Brisbane City Council determined that this policy question should be submitted to the voters, and no permits or approval would be granted unless the voters have approved the project. The permits and approvals will consist of 1. General plan amendment to change the land use designation of the development area from commercial to residential. 2. Changing the zoning classification of the property. 3. Approval of a specific plan for the project area. 4. Granting subdivision map approval to divide the property. 5. Granting a use permit and design permit for the proposed structures. And 6. Approval of a development agreement between the city and the developer. Applications for each of the permits and approvals listed above have been submitted to the city. Copies of the applications, together with plans and drawings for the proposed project, the conditions of approval, the tentative subdivision map, and the proposed development agreement are on file at the Brisbane City Hall and are available for review by any interested parties. These documents are also available on the city's website. Measure B is intended to be binding upon the developer and the city. If Measure B passes by a majority vote, the applications will be submitted to the City Council for approval. The quarry will thereafter be annexed to the City of Brisbane, and all of the permits and approvals will become effective. If Measure B does not pass by a majority vote, the applications will be submitted to the City Council for denial if they are not voluntarily withdrawn by the developer. The quarry will not be annexed to the city and will be entitled to continue its existing operations under any surface mining permit that may be issued by the County of San Mateo. So that is the official impartial analysis. Now we are going to hear the argument in favor of Measure B. Owen?
Thank you. Is this close enough? Can people hear me? First of all, I'd like to thank the City of Brisbane, League of Women Voters, Chamber of Commerce for having us here tonight. I think it's a great opportunity to be able to discuss Measure B with everybody, and I appreciate the audience being here tonight. So I want to thank you. I have with me tonight Jill Williams. Jill Williams is the architect for the project. Jill and I have been working on this project for many, many years, and I think Jill, it's probably been 7 years. Maybe I should give you a little introduction. I'm a real estate professional. I develop, I evaluate, and I manage real estate projects. This is what I do for a living. I've done it for a living for many years. I'm an architectural graduate, I'm a business graduate, I'm a California broker, and I'm a general contractor. So I understand real estate. 9 years ago, I met the owners of the Brisbane quarry, and I discussed the quarry with them. At the time, the two owners, the two brothers, one of the brothers moved to Idaho, the other brother stayed here, and at the time they expressed an interest. They said, you know, if there were a way to close the quarry, we might be interested. The next 9 years of my life, my number one job in Brisbane has been to find a way to close the quarry, and to close the quarry right now. In order to do that, I had to demonstrate to the owners of the quarry a use that was more economically viable than continuing quarry operation. When we looked at the quarry and we looked at the options out there, number one choice is residential, a residential use of some sort. Number two economic choice is to continue operating the quarry, and it goes down from there. A distant fourth was a business park. The quarry is under private ownership. It is not in the city of Brisbane. It is in San Mateo County. Quarry has operated since 1896. The people that own the quarry predate permit requirements to operate a quarry. They have a grandfathered use. Nonetheless, they do have an operating permit. It's been through a lot of hard work that we've been able to line this thing up with the city. It hasn't been easy. These guys are hardcore businessmen. Measure B is the only way this quarry is going to close. There is no other option. It's Measure B. 9 years working with these people, I know. And remember, I'm a real estate professional. My job is to find a use that makes sense. You may laugh at this, but you know what? Measure B is good for the environment. Look at these pictures. Show them. These pictures were taken 2 weeks ago. I went up there and took them. What you see here, this is what happened in 4 hours. This can happen every day. And this can continue for a long period of time. So if you want to talk about preserving San Bruno Mountain, you want to talk about closing the quarry. You want to talk about yes on Measure B. What Measure B is going to do, it's going to stop the quarry. It's going to stop trucks from operating. It's going to stop nighttime operations. It's going to stop dust. It's going to stop harm to the environment. In addition, the project that we've brought forward is going to create a community. And that community is going to provide $1.5 million to the Brisbane School District. It's going to provide that through $500,000 in a contribution and an additional school fees. The $500,000 was worked out with the school superintendent by going and seeing him and saying, "Sir, what is it that the school district needs? I can help you with that." The project, in addition, is providing the city with $6 million. In the design process, After we received approval from the Planning Commission to take the project to the City Council, we met with the City Council. The City Council had some concerns. We went out and we modified the project to satisfy the concerns of the citizens of Brisbane that were expressed through the City Council. In doing so, we granted to the city 5 acres at the back of the site as an open area, removing the project further from the hills that surround it. When we started this process, the city hired an EIR consultant, an Environmental Impact Report consultant. That firm was LSA. They were the city's consultants. When they did the EIR, the purpose of it was to study alternatives that were possible for the project. So the alternatives that were studied were a 212-unit residential project, a 183-unit residential project, a commercial project, business park, and the existing quarry operation. Those were the 4 alternatives that were studied. Others were not studied because they weren't an option. There was no point in studying something that wasn't going to happen. At the end of the study, David Clore, the author of the study for the city, said, after 25 years of experience in doing EIRs, this is the only project that I have ever seen where building the project has less impact than doing anything else. Now that was with 183 units. Since then, we have modified the project, and it's actually a smaller project today. And I think with that, what I'd like to do is have Jill Williams describe the project for you. Forgive me, Jill, the community.
Good evening, Jill Williams, architect with KTGY Group. Pleasure to be here, and I'd like to just take a few minutes and walk you through what we've been doing. As Owen mentioned, we have been involved in this for over 7 years. But really what we're so excited about is probably what's taken place in the last 6 months. And so if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the latest drawings that are at the city or on the website, I really encourage you to do that. We had a great opportunity. About 6 months or so ago, we really took on the challenge that we feel the council and the residents really brought to us to design something that would really fit the unique setting that we have here. It is such a great opportunity, and it really is a beautiful site. I mean, really lucky to think that you have the ability to design a new neighborhood in the setting. And so we sat down with our team of designers and really looked at what could we do, what would be really different, what would be appropriate, not just for the hillside setting, but just for the town of Brisbane. What could we create here? And of course, knowing our grading concerns, knowing our EIR approvals and all of that. We really set out to stretch ourselves and bring something back to the residents, to the council, that everybody would be proud of seeing build someday. And so up before you is the overall plan of the site. I'll adjust here a little bit. As Owen mentioned, and some of the things that have occurred lately within this last 6 months was the dedication of this upper area, which is around 4.85 acres, that brought back all the housing. And there's the upper loop street here then that provides access. So this site has been dedicated to the city. You'll see a few highlighted areas through here that are locating some of our more unique housing types. And then one of the other, we have our community park here at the base. And then also one of the main things, and we'll play up to this a little bit, but was the new trail. What you can see is that we're building at the base. We're building in the bowl of the site. We aren't near the benches that are out there. And so this is all being condensed, and the overall developed area is about 24 acres. And so even though we do feel from a housing standpoint it is on a fairly good slope, it's really down in the base. So here's the couple things that we were talking about: the upper 5 acres, the lower, Mike's in the way, the lower community park with the new community building, and then probably one of the largest changes that has happened is that the main access, vehicular access, has been changed, and that new area is just providing emergency, but it's really a trail. And so there's really just great pedestrian access for all of Brisbane up and through the site. The upper area that we talked about, and so then the lower area, we've always had a community park there, but what we've introduced is a new community building at the base, at the entry to the site, and here's a little plan of it. These are all exhibits that are part of the city submittal set that you can take a look at. So we're saying that this is going to be a coffee bar, a gathering space for all of Brisbane, potentially run by the HOA here, a few other concept elevations, and just a little bit of imagery. So really looking at this to service and really create a community tie. We have, as discussed, we have single-family homes. These have been redesigned. They take into account the grading of the site. You can see the hillsides coming up between the homes as they droop over the hill. All of that landscaping will be maintained by this homeowners association. On the peninsula piece, which we know is a very visible piece and very, very important, is the 16 live-work opportunity. So just 16 townhomes that will own a true office space, and they'll have signage that's obviously kind of a destination type facility, retail, that somebody knows where they're going when they're going there, but true office capability, little outlooks over the hill that are public spaces. And so they're showing out on the peninsula then these structures, and just looking to really come up with a unique design that would play off of our setting of the rocks and the hill behind us. And then the live-work that have been spaced throughout the community. One thing that was talked about was not segregating the attached and detached, but looking to really integrate them. And so these are our artist lofts that have been spread around the site. You can see it really taking advantage of playing up to getting natural light. They've been oriented properly and really looking at an expansive, true artist loft space that we think will be very attractive to somebody coming into Brisbane, and really just trying to create a varied lifestyle in this new neighborhood. And again, just a few ideas. And then back to the peninsula. Owen, do you want to wrap up quickly?
Sure. How much time do we have?
A minute.
30 seconds?
No, 1 minute.
1 minute? Quickly, I'll say that the community is providing $800 a year per house annually on the tax roll to support the HCP, the San Bruno Mountain HCP. Homeowner dues fund all the landscaping and improvements. New water facilities are being added for the city, which the fire department much needs for fire safety issues. And we're fixing a stormwater system that has an existing problem through Crocker Park as part of one of the benefits that we've agreed to provide to the city. I will also say that there's been a lot of discussion about, that'll be for the rebuttal.
Thank you. That was the argument in favor of Measure B. Now we will hear a rebuttal to the argument in favor of Measure B. Michelle? Philip's going to do it. Philip?
Hello, everybody, and thank you all very much for having this forum and for letting us debate this really vital issue for Brisbane. There's a lot to rebut here, so I'll let Michelle do her long introduction. And unfortunately, I first have to rebut the attorney's supposedly impartial analysis, because there's some unclear elements there. One, there's a suggestion that the quarry is operating under a permit currently. As far as we can tell, and we haven't seen any demonstrable proof to the contrary, the quarry's permit expired a long time ago. And the quarry is regulated supposedly by the county. The county could not even provide us a copy. We couldn't find it. So there's a big question there about what's going on right now. There's mention in the description of recreation fields. What's not said is that, as far as I know, the plan was to make the recreation field double as a floodplain. So think what that'll do to access to your recreation fields for months out of the year, perhaps. There's mention by Mr. Poole at the end, and also in the impartial analysis about HCP contributions, $800 per unit to the Habitat Conservation Plan. What's not being told here is that the development that's not finished yet on the Northeast Ridge, if it goes through, fully half of the contributions from the quarry development to the HCP will actually go to Brookfield Homes to reimburse them for a contribution that they apparently are going to make. So cut all those projections in half. Lastly, the key documents that are probably of greatest interest here are not the ones at the city desk. They're on the website, noquarryhousing.com. These are the documents that Brisbane residents have worked hard to dig up and interpret with really nobody else's help, and they're there for you to make your own decisions. Okay, there's quite a bit here. So Mr. Poole said that he's been charged to find a way to close the quarry that's the most economically viable. I think we all know what that means. That means the biggest bang for their buck, okay? Number one return would be housing. Of course, it's still, we still have the fumes of this outrageous housing market. Of course they want to cash out on this. There's a very, very big distance between that and number two, which is continuing the quarry operations. The quarry operations have got to be getting less and less economically viable. Rising gas prices, portable grinding and crushing and reprocessing equipment that's going to make trucking debris in and out of this remote site less and less viable. They've got to be desperate to close the quarry. There's not that much left to quarry as it is, as far as we can tell. So they're looking for a major way to get out. And frankly, this is like trying to come up with a really solid retirement plan, actually an outrageous retirement plan, 6 months before you retire. They've had 110 years of extracting profit out of the mountain. And now they got to get out. They got to close the quarry. They got to pay for a very expensive reclamation plan. And they got this hot housing market. They want to cash out. They want to have their cake and eat it too. So, and think about the long-term impacts on Brisbane. So, Mr. Poole also says that Measure B is the only way to close the quarry. That's simply not true. And maybe it's the only way we've got today, but they may not have an operating permit now. They may not get it renewed. They may not be able to quarry for much longer as it is. Then what? There's a colossal failure of the imagination here. We've got, I gotta run through here. Closing the quarry would be good for the environment. That's great. We all agree about that. Let's think about how we do it. There are threats and fear tactics being laid out here to get Brisbane residents to vote for this housing project, showing pictures of major industrial operations. The road cuts to the summit were devastated too when they were cut 80 years ago. Today they're hanging gardens of rare habitat that have reinstated themselves. The concern about the impacts that the quarry has. Why so sudden? Why is this coming now? To get you to vote for a housing project that you don't need. There's no shortage of affordable housing, of unaffordable housing in the Bay Area. Simply not. We don't need this kind of housing. Money to the schools and city, it's in long term, it's going to cost the city. It's going to cost all the taxpayers. These are big one-time gifts, but this is going to saddle the city with much greater long-term costs. Okay, the EIR is not something to be proud of. That's all I'll say about that. Other alternatives that weren't studied, again, they weren't studied because they've been deemed economically infeasible.
Thank you. And that was, if you could hold your applause to the end of the evening, I would appreciate it. Right now, we're going to take a few minutes to switch the audio-visual. And I would like to ask people in the audience, if you do have a cell phone or a pager, could you put it on vibrate, please? Thank you. So we'll reconvene probably in 3 to 5 minutes.
Say when.
In a sec. Thank you. In this part of the forum, those who are opposed to Measure B will be speaking for 15 minutes. And when they are through, there will be a rebuttal to the argument against Measure B. So right now, we're going to hear from Michelle Salmon, who is against Measure B.
Hello, thank you all for coming tonight. I'm sorry we're having technical difficulties with the slides, but we're just going to push forward. My name is Michelle Salmon, and I live in Brisbane. Many of you I have known for all of my life because we grew up together in this small town nestled in the nook of San Bruno Mountain. My family has lived in Brisbane for 4 generations, and my father, Jess Salmon, had the privilege of serving on Brisbane's first city council and served for over 13 years. Many of you are new to Brisbane, but love it just as much as I do and appreciate how rare and wonderful a place it is. In my role as co-chair of the campaign against quarry housing, I am here on behalf of our grassroots effort to defeat Measure B, an ill-conceived plan to build 173 high-end and high-priced housing units in the Guadalupe Quarry. Although Measure B is a local issue on the ballot, the outcome is of grave importance regionally and even nationally due to the rare and wild area that surround the Guadalupe Quarry and watershed that it feeds. I am grateful for the time to explain some of the intricacies of this multi-layered and complex issue that deeply affects us all. The Guadalupe Quarry has been in operation since 1895. Current operations consist of a mixture of surface strip mining for rock and gravel and the reprocessing of concrete, asphalt, and other deconstructed materials. The Guadalupe Quarry sits right smack in the middle of the last remnant of the native habitat corridor that stretches from the sandy slopes on the ocean side all the way to the San Francisco Bay on the eastern edges of San Bruno Mountain. The quarry is surrounded on 3 sides by San Bruno Mountain and Park and open space. The opening to the quarry valley abuts Crocker Industrial Park. The quarry is currently under the jurisdiction of San Mateo County and not part of Brisbane yet, but is under our sphere of influence and will ultimately be annexed by Brisbane, and therefore is part of Brisbane's 1994 general plan that was approved by the voters and is currently designated for open space and light industrial as the same type in the adjacent Crocker Industrial Park. For as long as I can remember, Brisbane has sought to close the quarry operations due to the excessive and dangerous dust, noise, pollution, heavy trucks, machinery, gravel spills, and harm to the surrounding environment. As a child, I can remember my mother cursing the quarry trucks as they ran through town, disregarding traffic stop signs and speed limits, spilling gravel everywhere in their haste to carve the heart out of San Bruno Mountain. Finally, in 1991, Brisbane, San Mateo County, and the quarry owners finally reached a lengthy and detailed, legally binding agreement that set the amount of material the quarry could mine and recycle before the owners finally, once and for all, had to stop quarrying. This agreement and the subsequent surface mining permit encompass not only the mineral rights but the conditions of operation, such as safety measures mitigating the dust and industrial pollution, land restoration to safe levels by the owners upon cessation of quarrying, annexation to Brisbane, and conditions eventually permitting the quarry owners to develop 3 light industrial warehouses of the same nature as what exists in Crocker Park. This agreement, in conjunction with the letter outlining the conditions of the surface mining permit issued in 1995, clearly states, in any event, the total amount of materials to be removed from under this permit shall not exceed the amount set forth in that certain quarry property agreement entered into by the City of Brisbane, Ralph Johnson, and American Rock and Asphalt, Inc., dated November 25, 1991, and amended April 6, 1992. Such amount being 6,455,014 tons, calculated March 1, 1991. This export tonnage, by the way, includes all the recycled materials as well. As of January 2005, almost 2 years ago, the quarry had less than 1,277,388 tons left allowed to extract from the quarry, about 5 years' worth at their current low rate of extraction. This is from their own reports filed with Brisbane that they would like to remain confidential and not made available to the general public, but you have the right to know the truth. These resource depletion reports are now available to read on our website at noquarryhousing.com. Now that the quarry has so little left to remove, and the site has done very little of the restoration or mitigation work that the owners agreed to, they want to change the terms of their binding agreement that they made with Brisbane and San Mateo County. They want us to amend the voter-approved general plan to rezone the land at the base of the quarry to make way for this ill-conceived and undefined housing project. A project that includes expectations from some future homeowners association that would take responsibility for many of the mitigation required by the environmental impact report, such as cat-proof fences and boulder removal. Sorry, cat-proof fences gets me every time. This even includes a provision for the homeowner payments toward the less than successful habitat conservation plan. This is not right, it is not fair, and most importantly, it is not safe. It goes way beyond basic common sense to build housing on this site. First off, we now know that living and working directly in this dust-laden environment will be very unhealthy, not only for the construction workers who would excavate and build the project, but for the families and children that would buy homes there. It is one thing to have a handful of indoor warehouse workers there 8 hours a day. It is quite another to have children out playing in the dust and babies living there 24/7. The only truly safe remedy for this site is time and the natural weathering of the exposed surfaces. There is a tremendous amount of earth laden with dust that will have to be excavated and removed and replaced with engineered landfill and imported topsoil before housing can be built. What kind of biological contaminants will be transported into Brisbane along with the hundreds of thousands of tons of imported landfill and topsoil? And don't forget the huge, deep moat around the steep base of the crumbling quarry cliffs that will have to be dynamited and dug for a rockfall catch basin. The environmental impact report clearly states that there are two major faults running through the quarry, the steep quarried walls. Rockfall is imminent. That is why part of the planned mitigation is to dig even deeper into the mountain to create a catch basin at the base of the steeply benched walls to keep rock from bouncing down the hill and causing damage. This mitigation plan also calls for unsightly protective fencing surrounding the perimeter of the development in an attempt to create a safe zone. I was working at the base of Telegraph Hill on the eastern side during the Loma Prieta quake. Hundreds and hundreds of tons of rock came down off that old quarry into what is now the foundation of Park Telegraph. They have a 30-foot high protective fence around the backside of that building, and they don't allow people there. You can see the signs in the slides because it's too dangerous, and you're not allowed to walk back there or anything. It was terrifying watching that amount of rock come down off of that old quarry. And they've covered some of the slopes of cyclone fencing to try to prevent further rockfall. As you can see from a sampling of the photos that were taken just last month, the walls above this quarry are very steep, crumbling, mostly not revegetated, and extremely dangerous. Except for the threat of poison oak, there is virtually nothing to keep a hiker or a curious kid from falling right off the edge of the mountain and down the cliffs into the quarry basin. This rock is extremely fractured and breaks away easily. Even if we needed this kind of housing, which we don't, this is not the place for it. The quarry owners will cite other Bay Area housing projects built in old quarries as being successful projects, although most of them were built after the 1989 quake, such as Park Telegraph, and none of them are built on this site with this kind of height of cliffs and rock that fractures as this does. Knowing what we know now, would anyone in this room build houses on the crumbling sea cliff of Daly City or in the direct flow of a mudslide, a natural disaster waiting to happen? Why would we even begin to think of building houses here? For money? Only those who seek to profit would do such a thing. The quarry owners want the people of Brisbane to believe that this will be a financial boon for Brisbane because they are willing to give us $7 million in compensation and donate some money to the school and donate some land to the county parks. Financial boondoggle is more like it. Property taxes on new homes typically do not cover the cost of police, fire, and other services that have to be provided for them. Housing in the remote and dangerous quarry will put undue financial burden on Brisbane for both basic utility services, which are already strained, and protective services, especially fire and emergency services. The quarry site is right in the midst of the highest wildland wildland fire hazard listed in our own general plan and with limited surface access. The proposal leaves both San Mateo County Park and the City of Brisbane in a position of high safety liability. And frankly, it doesn't matter how many liability releases the homeowners will sign. The buck still stops here with us. Is housing a good idea to get rid of the dust that they so kindly showed you? The owners, in direct violation of their surface mining permit, have stirred up quite a bit of dust lately, and one has to wonder why. You can see the dust swirling above the quarry in a photo taken during the heavily attended memorial service for Bill Lawrence. This is in direct violation of their mining permit, but it sure made for a good show for all of us attending the service, just as the recent increase in nighttime noise at the quarry. Is that to garner votes for the poor people who live on the ridge? If you think that voting for housing in the quarry will stop the dust and the noise, think again, people. Imagine the years of excavation, engineered land soil, formal topsoil and unknown sources, protective fencing, and everything else. And most of all, the amphitheater of amplified echoing noise of every car, motorcycle, stereo, barking dog, and even raised voices from the homes built below these towering cliffs. The noise could make the ridge quite unlivable. We will also be trading a handful of truck trips for over 1,600 additional car trips per day, every day, forever. And the quarry owners have tried very hard to make the people of Brisbane believe that they can keep on quarrying for another 20 to 50 years unless we accept housing. They want you to believe this is a valuable mineral resource that they can waltz in and renew their mining permit any time. This is simply not true. They have less than 5 years left worth of material that they can remove from the site, and then quarry operations must stop per their agreement already in place. Then they must do the land remediation, the habitat restoration, and the mitigation requirements that were agreed on. This is not only stated in the quarry property agreement, but in every condition of operation and ultimate closure is reiterated and stated in the surface mining permit and the resolution under which they currently have been allowed to continue to operate, even though they are in violation of the conditions and the terms. If the owners want to void the quarry property agreement currently in effect and apply for a new or amended surface mining permit, there is nothing to legally preclude the owners from doing just that. However, they will have to go through the entire process all over again under today's conditions. The quarry property agreement was made and agreed to by all parties, the county, the city, and the quarry owners, in a transparent and honest public process. This landmark agreement was based on hundreds of hours of numerous input. It's what Brisbane wanted, what San Mateo County wanted, and what the quarry owners wanted and agreed to in perpetuity. Now that the rock is running out and the quarry is no longer a viable long-term operation, it is time to pay the piper what is due. The current quarry owners are trying to shirk the financial and legal responsibility of the land remediation plan that was agreed upon, and instead they would lay this burden on the citizens of Brisbane and the people of San Mateo County, and a remote and exclusive housing development and subdivision that would be highly profitable for them and a big financial drain on us, the people of Brisbane. They would donate land to the park and let the county deal with the liability of the cliffs and crumbling benches. On September 27th, Owen Poole at the San Mateo County Board said, well, they're not going to act on any agreement that's not economically viable. Is that why he thinks the current agreement isn't in place, is no longer valid? Not enough profit for how much work they need to clean up their mess? Does that mean that we defeat Measure B and do not allow housing on this dangerous site, that the quarry owners won't honor this agreement either? Is that how they do business in Sandpoint, Idaho? I don't think so. There is nothing to invalidate or amend this agreement, and there is no reason to believe the county would renew their mining permit beyond the already established limits. We are asked to believe and trust, only being allowed blindly to vote on whether to allow a subdivision of 173 multi-unit residences being built in Guadalupe Quarry. They do not even have a developer. They do not know who will be the real estate speculator on this one. It is bogus for us to even consider saying yes to any change in the general plan for housing. Who will clean up their mess? Who will do the necessary remediation? And who will be responsible to restore the lands to safe levels? Do not let them off the hook by allowing housing on this dangerous site. They have taken plenty of profit out of our mountain for the last 110 years, and they should have set aside the funds to close the quarry properly like they agreed to. It is time to stop lining their pockets at our expense. Although Brisbane will bear the brunt of this cost if this poorly thought out measure passes, all of the region will suffer a tremendous loss. Most of you have asked, If not housing, then what? Frankly, I don't know. But there are still many possibilities to explore. But this I do know. Housing is the last end use of the land and the one that will cost us the most. Once there is housing, there is no going back or changing your mind later. San Bruno Mountain is not just a resource for Brisbane that needs protecting from unwise and unsafe projects like this. It is the jewel in the crown of the peninsula for all of us to share. It is a precious, rare, and endangered habitat, a miracle of survival in an urban jungle. Every day we pass ecologically sustainable barriers that we cannot go back and fix. Extinct species, global warming, massive development. Is this about saving a few butterflies? Well, yes, but not only and not just because. These now rare species are an indicator of our own survival. This is about saving our own environment for our future. One field, one valley, and one pond at a time if need be.
Please hold your applause until the end of the forum. Thank you. Now we will have a 5-minute rebuttal to the argument against Measure B. Owen and Jill.
Thank you. Well, I don't know where to start. I guess I'll start with very first statement, ultimately annexed to the city. I don't know if anybody in the room knows how LAFCO works, but in a LAFCO annexation, the property owner has to agree to the annexation, particularly when it's one property we're talking about. The property owner will never agree to an annexation for a use that the property owner does not want to see happen on his property. It is private property. When we talk about the property agreement, I love all these numbers and things that have been rattled around by people that are not in the quarry business. It's quite amazing to me. How many people in this room, I'd like a show of hands, how many people in this room own a house? Okay, when you bought your house, you entered into a purchase agreement with a broker or with a seller or somebody, and you put up a check, a deposit check, and then you closed your deal. Well, guess what? The quarry and the city entered an agreement. They wrote it in 1991, they signed it in 1992, and guess what? No party ever acted on the agreement. Nobody did anything. Now, if you look at this agreement, you'll see on the very bottom of it, Exhibit 5 of the agreement that everybody's talking about, in 2/194, the city was to annex the property to the city of Brisbane. Did that happen? No, it did not happen. You know why it didn't happen? The transaction didn't make any economic sense. It's like you go out there and you write your check on your deposit on the house and you say, you know what, honey? This isn't the right house for us. We're going to move on. Yeah, you've got an agreement, but it doesn't make any sense and you don't execute it. So that's the first part of that. In terms of material in the quarry and how much material there is, and this discussion about quantities back and forth. Mignon Wood is here tonight, and any of you can speak to Mignon after the meeting. Mignon's business is to permit, operate quarries and keep them in general compliance in the state of California. And I think her firm handles about 30 of them. This just happens to be one of them. Mignon is the lady that gives the city the reports we're talking about. Those reports are based upon a reclamation plan that is not about to be implemented. What we have before us right now is a proposal on Measure B. That proposal is the ultimate reclamation plan for the quarry as it sits today. The quarry has been slowing down its operation to keep the balance of dirt in the property more or less equal with what's proposed on this application. Here, and anyone can look at this after the meeting, is a prior reclamation plan. In this reclamation plan, the valley of the floor, this is an approved reclamation plan by the way, goes down to an elevation of 105 feet. The quarry as it's designed right now is at 480 feet. That's 300 and some odd feet of more fill that's in there.
Now, let's just forget that kind of discussion for a minute. Take your car, drive out to the quarry. When you reach the quarry entrance, what happens? You drive up a hill. What's under the hill? Rock. Quarry hasn't reached its half-life. So the next question is, well, so why is the quarry not continuing to quarry forever? The answer, I said it before, it's owned by two brothers. One brother passed away. One brother moved to Idaho. They were hoping to sell this before the other brother passed away. The quarry can continue to operate. Here is the existing agreement with the county that nobody can seem to find. And in the agreement, there is an option which allows the quarry operator, in spite of the agreement with the city, to alter the amount of material that they can excavate from the site. It's a matter of creating a new reclamation plan, bringing it to the state. Speaking of that, the Bay Area has 28 to 45% of the required aggregate for the next 50 years. This project, this quarry, is a state resource. The county of San Mateo is obligated to protect state resources. It's in the State Resource Act.
Thank you. Now we come to the question and answer part of our forum. Each side will be given the opportunity to answer the same question. Each side will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Once again, I would remind the audience to hold your applause and your comments until the end of the forum. Our first question: how will the quarry development affect the character of Brisbane? And we'll start with the pro. Owen?
Well, I think our goal along the whole way has been that it adds to the character of Brisbane, that it plays upon the beauty and the uniqueness of the setting, the housing, and just the whole community altogether. So it's always been the goal of this design that it would only add to and play upon that, and through the quality of materials, through the design, through the whole treatments that have been done to create just the right setting within the bowl of this quarry.
If I may add to that, with home ownership, you find that people care, and they want to protect their environment. When you live in a place as special as this community can be, you are going to do everything you can to keep that community in as pristine a condition as you can. And if not because you're environmentally friendly, which you may very well be, but also for your pocketbook. This is a very unique situation. We've worked very hard on this project. We care very much about it. I care very much about San Bruno Mountain. I would even ask David Schooling if he could be a consultant on our team to help our landscape architect and our biologist. I would welcome that. We have taken the primary road, made it a secondary access, so you can walk by Al and Buckeye Canyon. We've agreed to work with all of the federal and state agencies on all of the. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
I think that housing in the quarry will very much detract from the current character of Brisbane. I think that the noise level amplified by the rock walls will make living on the ridge very unpleasant. I think that it will interrupt the long corridor of the habitat that we've worked so hard to protect. I think housing is dangerous in the quarry. It's right in the midst of a fire habitat. I do not think it will add to Brisbane's character in a positive way at all to put in, 150 very high-end, very expensive houses for multi-unit buildings and a whole separate community, separate from the rest of Brisbane. We've worked very hard to integrate the Ridge into central Brisbane, and the quarry is isolated from both of those places and has no easy access. It's over a mile from central Brisbane. I could see a future development in the quarry being a destination for perhaps a habitat learning center, or even light industrial buildings of the same nature that's in Crocker Park right now. But housing, no, I don't think it will add to the character. Philip?
At least there would be some real tax revenue from some industrial facilities, but think about the light pollution alone and how that will alter the character of Brisbane. Remember, the building's not done on the Northeast Ridge, and there's massive development going to happen on the mainlands. We all pretty much agree that that's going to happen. And the light pollution right there is going to be really significant. And this is not infill housing. Just because it's a bombed out site doesn't mean it's time to pave it all over. I mean, this is textbook sprawl. This is unaffordable, over large houses, disjunct from the community.
On a dangerous site.
Thank you. Our next question. The quarry has been in operation since 1895. What will cause it to close if not Measure B? And second part, why do people want to close the quarry? And this time we'll start with the con side.
What will cause it to close is that the county has already stated exactly how much material they can remove from the quarry. And they're at the end of their limit. If they take much more out, they will have to go and do the entire process all over again and apply for new permits. The county is only allowing them to continue because of this planned proposal, or we revert back to the original agreement that was made for 3 light industrial buildings. And the quarry has a natural lifetime, any more than this, and they will not be able to do anything else with it. Why do people want the quarry to close? Because it's a nuisance. There is dust and dirt and gravel and noise. That's why people want the quarry to close.
Okay. Owen and Jill? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you guys were through. I'm sorry.
It's okay. How much time?
You were at 51 seconds.
So I think I've forgotten the questions. But what will close the quarry, if not Measure B? I think it was. Well, it may be so. Mr. Poole is the real estate professional, and they have all the documents, I'm sure. But the best analysis that we have done, and we've showed these documents to a lot of people, we've asked a lot of questions, and we're not getting any demonstrable proof of the opposite, is that they believe that they're just going to go back to the county, and because the county's been lax in regulating them, in fact, the county should have immediately initiated a re-permitting process as soon as the first home builder withdrew back in, 2002, right? But they didn't. And I don't think that the quarry's operating under a legal permit right now. That's my guess. I don't know for sure. But it's not going to be a cakewalk to go through the county, not if the people of Brisbane are real about diminishing this nuisance. If they're going to keep quarrying for a few years, then they're going to have to be better regulated, and the community has to build up the will to bring the necessary pressure to bear on the regulating agencies to make sure that this isn't such a nuisance.
Thank you. Jill and Owen.
Okay, the question is, what will cause the quarry to close? Measure B. Yes, on Measure B will cause the quarry to close. At this point in time, nothing else will. And when we talk about a quarry continuing to operate, we're not talking 5 years, we're not talking 10 years. We're talking well beyond my lifetime. As I said, it hasn't reached a half-life. Now, the reason I say it that way is it's going to be a function of how rapidly people want to excavate material from the quarry. As I said earlier, the Bay Area only has between 27 to 46% of the required aggregate that it needs for the next 50-year build-out. There are very few quarries left. The material is scarce. Therefore, the value goes up. Now, we can create any kind of reclamation plan we want, and we can alter that reclamation plan as time goes along. As I said, I have one here that's a big V into the ground. We can do that if we wanted to. It's merely a question of going to renew our permit. Now, our permit doesn't, how do I want to say this? Our permit is technically on hold, and the reason our permit is technically on hold is because we have told the state we're contemplating using this residential project as a reclamation plan. Now, when this is voted yes, this will become the quarry's reclamation plan. It will be the grading that they use to close the quarry. Because it's an initiative, and it isn't known for a fact that that's going to occur, we don't have the ability to actually make it a permit until we know it's so. So, if you vote no, we'll do a different reclamation plan.
Thank you. Our next question concerns alternative uses for the quarry. Is there a chance for something like a botanical garden created in the quarry? And why is housing the only thing that can go there? Are there alternative uses for the quarry other than housing? And this time we'll start with the pro.
Let's say for a minute that somebody came forth with enough money to buy the quarry right the way it is now and annexed it to the city of Brisbane. I would say to you, you better be very, very careful, because if you don't know what your end use is, and you don't know how to get there, and you can't demonstrate it, you could be looking at tens of millions of dollars to come up with a reclamation plan. So if you want to talk about exposure to the city financially, think about that. Think about making this a botanical gardens. What does that mean? Do you have to dig out 150 feet of fill and recompact it so it's safe? So people can walk on it? Think about it. What is it the requirement's going to be? When we looked at that, and we looked at the cost to make this property safe, the most viable alternative, if you're going to change the use, is residential. If you don't want to change the use, you quarry, and you quarry till the rock is gone.
Conside?
Well, the only alternatives that the EIR analyzed, is because they're apparently the only financially feasible ones, were two residential versions, the business park of the existing operations. And, you know, we've got an extraordinary site here, and we've got a very ordinary use being proposed for it. So, you know, I hope that the people of Brisbane are willing to really galvanize a vision and think big, think a lot bigger than this. This is an amazing site. And we know that we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. And we have been asking around, we being Mountain Watch and other people, have been asking around, and I don't have a name to give you tonight of people who are interested, but I can say, and you just have to take my word for it, that there are people who are capable of tens of millions of dollars who are very interested and who are waiting to see what happens. But they're not going to get involved now because they are not advocacy groups. They don't want to interfere in Brisbane politics. They're considering being future tenants of the site. They don't want to alienate themselves in any way. So please, dare to think big and to dream big and hold out for something a lot better. And I mean, this could be of such regional significance, local significance, regional significance. It could be something that, don't underestimate what a botanic garden is. The world's greatest botanic gardens are the greatest assets for communities. Bouchard Gardens, the UC Botanic Garden across the Bay and other botanic gardens, don't underestimate, please, what kind of resources are available to create that.
I just want to say, don't give up. We've waited 50 years to close this quarry. Don't give up. Don't give it up for housing. Dare to dream, people. Dream of something bigger and better than that. Please, vote no on Measure B. It's ridiculous.
Okay, our next question. I understand that $6 million would go to the city of Brisbane. How will this money be spent? And this time we will start with the con.
I don't actually know how they plan to spend it, but it won't go very far in today's market, considering what servicing those houses and the fire and police and protection and sewer and water and everything else is going to cost. Right now, we have a fairly decent rate on water, but it's going up. It's going to go up considerably over the next 10 years. What about sewer? We're already paying through the nose on sewer. How are we going to pay for all of that? $7 million, $6 million really doesn't go very far in today's market at all, and will certainly not cover the long-term cost of this housing development. Brisbane has an annual budget of over $11.5 million for a population right now that's estimated by the U.S. Census Bureau of being 3,500. Do the math. This housing development is going to cost us a lot more than a paltry $7 million. That doesn't even buy 3 of the homes that they're planning to build.
Across California, local governments get exactions, gifts from developers for residential development, and across California, almost without exception, from what I understand, residential development is a drain on city coffers. $6 million up front, it's not insignificant, but long term, it kind of is. And the applicants talk about improving the water facilities, the sewer facilities. Look at the pictures of massive development that are being proposed for the quarry. Isn't that going to put an incredible burden on the system that apparently is going to improve? So I don't think that there's a chance that a mere $6 million is going to equal out what this proposal would load onto Brisbane long term.
Thank you. Jill and Owen?
I'm glad we're talking about $6 million because it does bring up a lot of issues. Before I address the $6 million directly, there were comments made about the housing project costing the city money. One of the problems that the city has right now is with its water and its water tanks. Its water tanks require frequent flushing and rechlorinization, which has been a continuing problem. What's happened with the quarry development is at one time it was going to have one large tank. It now has 3 smaller tanks that are all put together in tandem and are easily hidden behind vegetation. But the reason is that what that's going to allow the city to do is to rotate its water and move it more frequently. Keep in mind I'm not a civil engineer, but I'm paraphrasing Randy. And that will allow for the need for less chlorination. It'll keep the water fresher. It'll also give the fire department redundancy. And when the fire departments look at redundancy, what we're talking about is when there's a fire in an emergency situation and a portion of the system gets shut down, they have more system to work with. So that's just a benefit beyond the $6 million. Now the $6 million itself, how that number was derived from, that number was basically a formula that the city manager and I put together using what funds were taken from the project where you sit today and extrapolating that down to 212 units. That number still hasn't changed, although the project number is now lower. And the $6 million is basically, city, decide where you need it most. I don't want to allocate that. I don't want to negotiate that with the city manager. I want you to see where you need it most.
Thank you. Our next question concerns the infrastructure, which is what we were just touching on in a way. Okay? If Measure B is approved, how will the infrastructure of Brisbane be affected? including such things as road, landscaping, police and fire services, water and sewer maintenance. Will there be an increased cost to the taxpayers of Brisbane if this measure is passed? And we'll start with the flow. One of the bad things about only having two sides, and you start the next question, so not much chance for rest.
It looks like I'm going to be hitting on a bunch of these. I think we've talked about fire and the water and the redundancy that the fire department has wanted. Sewer, the existing sewer system, it pumps. I think it pumps north. I can't remember exactly which station it is, but we are paying to upgrade the pumps in the existing station, which are actually in a shall we say a state of deferred maintenance right now. Landscaping is paid for 100% by the homeowners in the association. If it's not paid for 100% by the homeowners, it's paid for out of the HCP funds, which incidentally do not go towards this development. They are on the tax roll. It's taken out of your tax bill. It is given to that into the HCP. It doesn't go anywhere else. When you look at the site, you'll notice that it's 150 acres, of which only 25 acres is the development of the site. The rest of it is either landscaped transitional area or area that is to be maintained in a natural vegetated manner, as is San Bruno Mountain, or put back into that shape. So that covers landscape, fire, sewer, roadways. One 18-wheeler truck equals 43 cars. Think about that. When the EIR was done and the traffic was studied, there is no traffic impact. None. And the project contributes to the improvement of existing roads that are existing in the city now.
Thank you. Michelle and Bill?
Yeah, as far as infrastructure, I would encourage folks to think of Brisbane. It's human habitat. It's a distinct habitat and a distinct watershed. The mountain is part of the infrastructure. The air quality is part of the infrastructure. It's all part of our infrastructure. And there are a lot of things that can't be priced. We can't pin a cost on, but we know that they're valuable. Saving open space is not a bipartisan. It is a bipartisan issue. We generally agree that it's a good thing and that we need to have cleaner air. This is so there will be impacts to infrastructure in that sense. Again, the HCP, yes, the funds are not going to go directly from those homeowners to Brookfield Homes, but through the HCP funding arrangement currently being crafted, and don't take my word for this, ask city manager, half of the funds that would come from there under the HCP would be going to reimburse Brookfield Homes for their funding arrangement. Half. 25 acres are going to be developed. All the rest is going to be landscaped areas needing to be maintained. Go around the mountain, please, and see. This is not a criticism of the homeowners around the mountain, but the mechanism of homeowners associations taking charge of vast areas of landscaping with very special needs because of the value, the ecological values. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So don't trust the HCP to take care of it.
The whole amount of the $800 tax fund, whatever you want to call it, contribution to the HCP for each housing unit, not each resident, equals about $120,000 a year. That might pay 2 full-time gardeners or maybe 3 if you went cheap. But so it will affect the infrastructure, and you cannot rely on that kind of funding to cover the cost.
Thank you. Before we do our next question, could I ask either side of you, what is an HCP? Some of the voters may not be familiar with that acronym.
Okay. Sorry, HCP, we tend to talk in acronyms after a while, sorry. Habitat Conservation Plan. sounds great, but it really should be called a profit conservation plan. Without going off on it, it's a mechanism that was inserted into the Endangered Species Act that allows the destruction of rare species and rare species habitat, federally listed endangered species. And the deal is that if developers get a permit to do this, in exchange for monies that then go to a fund that's used to manage the rest of the habitat. And this is part of federal law, and the very first habitat conservation plan was developed for San Bruno Mountain, the Northeast Ridge right here, and it's been a model for thousands of other habitat conservation plans around the country, none of which are working.
Ollie, do you have anything to add to that?
I certainly do, and I'm glad you brought up that it's the first HCP plan. And as I said earlier, I do care very much about San Bruno Mountain. I also say that I've been in the real estate business a long time. Dave Dalter and Christian Marsh's dad, I think it's Jonathan Marsh, were the first people that wrote that HCP. And I've talked to them. As a matter of fact, I talked to Dave Dalter just last week about it. And Christian Marsh, I talked to him frequently. He was taken over from his father's lead. We know that the HCP here in Brisbane, being the first one, has problems. We recognize that. That's why the fee that we've offered up is $800 per unit per year. The typical residential fee is something like $100 and change. I don't know the exact number, but this was significantly more because we recognize that shortfall. Not only do we recognize that shortfall, we have people who are experts who are willing to come back in with the experience that they've had with other HCPs and help fix this one.
Kathy, can I answer that? Just briefly, and something non-partisan in nature.
Sort of. The HCP is a little bit like taking the Indians and moving them to a reservation and expecting their culture to survive.
Do you have anything to add, Owen or Jill? Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying what an HCP is. I'm sure our viewers at home are interested in knowing what an HCP was so that they can better make up their minds on this issue. Our next question concerns traffic. If Measure B is passed, there will be more houses built. How will this impact traffic, specifically on Owl Canyon and Buckeye Canyon? And this time we will start with the con.
Okay, the traffic projections, I think, in the EIR suggested as many as 1,600 car trips per day, as much as. Or, yeah, there are different versions, and the project's been scaled back a bit. But, how many cars are ultimately going to be there? These are large homes. There could be quite a few more people with quite a few more cars. The original project had the egress, the entrance and the egress, and the entrance and exit going on the Quarry Road at the base of Owl and Buckeye Canyons, and because of strong suggestions from the community to the city planners, the arrangement was switched so that would become the emergency access, and that the planned new route, which was going to be the emergency access down to South Hill, that's going to be the primary entrance and exit. So traffic on Owl and Buckeye Canyon, it's hard to say. I mean, traffic is having a huge effect on the mountain habitats. We're learning that smog is composed largely of nitrogen, which is getting deposited in enormous amounts in heavy urban areas. It's as much as your average Central Valley farm field. We're talking about 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre, just from smog and heavy traffic. And that's having a dramatic effect on habitats all over, particularly grasslands, which are primarily of concern here. How all this traffic, how one can say that this isn't going to have any impact is really mind-boggling, especially the cumulative impact with what's foreseen in the Baylands and the remaining development on the Northeast Ridge. I don't see how anybody can credibly say that there's going to be no impact.
Thank you. Owen and Jill? a response?
Traffic, okay. I was going to bring up traffic, and I decided not to. Reason being is that it's a very, very difficult thing to explain to a layperson. But when it comes to Allen Buckeye Canyon and the traffic that goes by it, the answer to that question is really simple: none. The only traffic that will go by those two canyons are police cars, ambulances, and fire engines, if they need to. None. That was the deal that we worked out with Mountain Watch in exchange for supporting the project. But that didn't happen. But still, we left it changed. Now, when you want to talk about traffic, it is difficult. And what I did do is I did look at a couple of the intersections. And you can look at the EIR, it's down at the city. But I'll give you a couple of examples. The interchange at Sierra Point. With the completion of this project versus no project, peak rush hour traffic, you have one more car using the interchange. Now, you have to look at all the diagrams. Cars go every which way. They go all over the place. But one of the big deals about this is when you have an 18-wheeler out there, it really slows down a lot of cars. And it really creates a lot of traffic problems. So you can't look at it and just quantify it by numbers. You've got to look at it, quantify it by numbers, see how rapidly a truck slows down an intersection, cars stack up. So it's a tough issue to answer without an in-depth study. People will look at it, they'll scratch their heads and say, wait a minute, you just put in 170 houses, how can you only have one more car in interchange? You have to go through the study to get that answer. But remember, Allen Buckeye, no traffic. None.
Thank you. Our next question concerns the lagoon. I live over on the coast, so I'm not real familiar with Brisbane, and I'm getting a real workout tonight, learning all about the different places. What would happen to the lagoon, the other end of the Guadalupe watershed, in which the quarry exists? Would there be runoff water flowing into the lagoon, and would that cause problems? This time we'll start with the pro.
I'm really glad you brought that one up. First of all, I'd like to say that the quarry, as it operates today, is in compliance with all of its water runoff requirements. We took a very, very careful look at how to design this project in order to better the existing runoff, in order to better the water quality of the storm drain system. The park that is at the bottom of the project is essentially a flat soccer field. The field is designed to be a filtration area that will allow, as the water runs through it, it will allow it to filter before it goes into an outfall. This is cutting-edge California high-tech C3 requirements. Some of the civil engineers, some of the environmentalists in the room may be aware of those. Many municipalities are using the same technique now in the middle of roads and the boulevards to make sure that they purify and clean water runoff on city streets. In terms of what we're talking about that, to understand the impact of that on a recreational field, it's none. It's zero, because what you're talking about is something like 1 to 2 inches of water running through that field in a major rainstorm. Guess what? In a major rainstorm, nobody's playing soccer. It has no impact on the integrity of the field, but it certainly cleans the water. And so we're very proud of that. And we're very proud of the approach we've taken. And several civil engineers in Northern California have looked at it for examples for their communities.
Thank you. Michelle and Phil?
Well, I'm certainly no engineer either, and I do know that there are incredible ways to use vegetation and various types of arrangements to filter sediment out of water and other impurities out of runoff. So that may be so. I don't know how, I mean, 1 inch or 2 of water is actually a very significant amount of water, and I mean, yeah, maybe not during the rainstorm would you be playing soccer, but it's not like it's going to dry up and be ready to play. I mean, it could be soaked all spring long. I don't know how that's going to work. At any rate, I would like to take a second to respond to the notion that Mountain Watch may have backstabbed the developer. Mr. Poole, if you had ever asked me straight out if I would support the project in exchange for that road arrangement or anything else, I would have answered you. And I would have answered you with the same answer I have tonight. You never asked.
Okay, let's not do any personnel
Let
attacks,
me,
please.
Let me finish. Water runs downhill, and so does everything else. And that includes every little last bit of drip of oil from somebody's not tuned up car, every bit of Roundup somebody wants to use in their garden, every bit of thing that you just don't want to put down the sewer, so you just, I'll just throw it down here. I'm sorry, people are messy. People are dirty, no matter how much they try not to be. And it goes down the drain, down the storm drain, where animals and birds and plants live. We have worked so hard, and Mother Nature has worked so hard to clean up the lagoon and have it a viable bird habitat for birds, and it's just beautiful. And it used to be a cesspool, and this project could work towards making it a cesspool again. I'm sorry, I don't see how having it drain through a soccer field is going to help.
Thank you. Our next question. Is there any thought to creating a permanent wetlands as part of the project? And we'll start with the con.
Not that I'm aware of. Are you, Philip?
Well, Mountain Watch explored that possibility, the possibility of using the already graded area at the bottom of Owl Canyon, which many the local kids know as the Frog Pond area, but it's a much bigger area. And we hired a consultant to come out and study the feasibility of capturing runoff out of the quarry site, or whatever would happen in that site, and running it into a series of debris catchments and siltation basins that could be easily maintained and scooped out without harming the environment, and then the water would meander into a larger wetland. And the consultant said it was absolutely feasible. It would improve water quality on the other end, and they were very excited by it. But we just wanted to know if that was feasible, and who knows, maybe that may someday happen independent of this project. But I don't think there's anything more to say about it. No.
I'm completely open to the idea of creating a natural habitat. I do a lot of work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, California Fish and Game, the Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA Fisheries. But I'll say this. What you find with state and federal agencies is if an area is natural the way it is, they may be resistant to allowing you to change it to something it wasn't. So if it turns out that biologically, environmentally, the agencies say, yes, it used to be a wetland down here, yes, we could do it, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. It's almost one of those decisions, though, that is, it's really a federal and a state decision. But it's one in which we can certainly put forward a proposal and have them comment on it. And I'd be happy to have anybody from Mountain Watch help me with that. Absolutely.
Jill, you have anything to add? No? Okay. Our next question concerns the schools. With adding more living units, there will be an increased population in the schools. Has there any thought been given to what to do, like constructing schools, especially a high school? And we'll start with the pro side. Any thought to school construction?
You know, the interesting thing about the school construction is that in San Mateo County, there's been declining enrollment in schools, which is not typical for the Bay Area. There are actually communities in San Mateo County where school districts are selling surplus property. In terms of needed infrastructure for schools, the only school that had needs was the Brisbane Elementary School District. and I met with the superintendent. We spent 3 or 4 hours together. We walked the site where the children would go to school. I asked him what his needs were, what he thought he'd need, how he would need that money, when it would, what he would do with it. And that's how we came up with the agreement. I didn't dictate $500,000. I asked him what he needed and how could I make it work. And so we took that $500,000, we tied it to an inflation factor as to when the project actually starts. And then in addition to that, we added in the state-mandated school fees that are based on a per-unit basis. Currently, that number comes up to $1,338,000. I just checked it this morning on my calculator.
Thank you. Michelle and Philip?
I don't know exactly how it will affect the schools, and I do know that $500,000 doesn't go very far in today's market for teachers and schools and funding. I know that children will have to probably be bused to the elementary school because it is too far to walk, because it's over 2 miles to the elementary school. As far as the high school in Brisbane, that's been a debate since my parents went to Jefferson and lived in Brisbane. I don't know. In some ways, I think that it would be good to have a high school, and in other ways, I think having Brisbane kids go outside of Brisbane and see a greater, wider world and get some practical experience in a greater world than just in Brisbane is good for them. So I don't think this development will produce the much debated high school in Brisbane.
And I would encourage everybody to think about the totality of children's education. It does go beyond schools, and the schools here are lucky enough to have incredible wild habitat as science classrooms right out their back door, and they go on the mountain, and how this kind of development, I mean, the kids are hearing about climate change. The kids are learning about mass extinctions that are going on globally. Learn about this in school, and then they can turn around and look outside the school and see houses that the average house now is twice the size of the average house in 1950. Houses half as many people. It's not sustainable. And this is if this community saddles the children with this housing burden, not an asset, but a burden, that is a way of educating them about how not to do things. That's my take.
Thank you. And our last question of the evening. Who is currently responsible for the restoration of the quarry as a natural habitat? And who would be responsible if Measure B passes? And this time we'll start with the con. Michelle and Philip?
Well, from all of the agreements that I've read, with the surface mining permit and the quarry property agreement and all of the documents that we have, the quarry owners would be responsible for the remediation of the land and the reclamation project and the habitat restoration according to those agreements that have been in place for all these years and under the conditions of the permit, which they've been operating under and taking profits out of the mountain for all these years. So, as far as I know, it's the quarry owner's responsibility. If Measure B passes, I don't actually know whose responsibility it will be.
Well, I suggest that this is a huge responsibility. It's a very good question. And I think that granting the owners the ability to build a major housing development and will allow them to get out of this responsibility in large part. And I mean that they intend to use this model of passing a lot of responsibility onto future homeowners. The one-time installation, there is no one-time reclamation. There's no one-time fix-all. It all comes down to maintenance. It all comes down to maintenance. And it's not 5 years, it's not 10 years, it's longer. And this homeowners association, which doesn't exist yet, is very unlikely to be able to carry on a long-term maintenance of habitat if the experience is anything like it has been elsewhere around the mountain. And that's because, just take Terra Bay, for example. The homeowners are ready, but the home builder never fulfilled their obligations. And so the homeowners are saying, to protect ourselves, no way are we going to take over yet. You've got to do X, Y, and Z. You've only done X. And so meanwhile, nobody's doing anything. They're legal battles. It's a mess.
Thank you. Owen, and your thoughts about the restoration of the habitats?
Restoration of the habitat is a good question. I'm glad it was brought up. The key to the question is transition. If the measure passes, when the measure passes, that's better. Several things happen concurrently. The first thing that happens is we bring forth improvement plans and architectural plans to the city to begin the process of reviewing those plans, doing the plan check, getting those plans approved, getting them permitted. With those plans, you're talking about civil engineering plans, grading plans, those types of plans. Concurrently with that going on, the quarry in the county is finalizing a reclamation plan. We now take the idea, we put it into a complete reclamation plan. While that reclamation plan is being finalized to mesh with the grading plan with the city, we're dismantling the quarry equipment, we're taking the quarry equipment away. The key to compliance and the key to the city to hold the quarry's feet to the fire is LAFCO. If the city if the local area formation committee, if the city is not happy with the way the reclamation plan is being conducted, it can merely not allow the quarry to annex to the city. If the city doesn't process the plans as shown in Measure B, the same thing can happen the other way. So it's a transitional agreement in which both parties have the ability to hold the other party accountable. Exactly how far the quarry will take the reclamation, where that stops, where the city takes over, will be refined by the plans.
Thank you. And this concludes the question and answer part of our forum. Now each side will give a 5-minute closing statement. We will begin with the pro side. So Owen and Jill. You need to catch breath.
You know, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time this evening. And there's a lot of information out in front of you. And we do encourage you to look into all of these further and look into these documents that have been discussed. And there's more information there than what you have heard from one side. As stated, our main goal and our main message is that Measure B will close the quarry. It will give us the opportunity to go ahead and process these designs. We've talked about the designs. Really encourage you to go and take a look and see that it isn't an ordinary subdivision. There is a new website that you can look at called closethequarry.com, and we encourage you to take a look at that and look at who is backing this and the support that we have. No, you have a few items to add?
You know, year after year, nothing's happened with the quarry. I mean, people have talked about closing the quarry for years, but nothing's happened. The operation continues. You say yes to this measure, and the quarry closes. You say no to this, and the quarry keeps quarrying forever. Not forever, for the foreseeable future. I shouldn't say forever. I don't mean forever. I take that back. I eat my words. Close the quarry now. You're going to get cleaner air, less dust, less traffic, no more trucks. You're going to get good schools, provided needed infrastructure. We're actually putting about $250,000 into the auditorium at the school. You're going to get homeowners. Homeowners take great pride. Home ownership establishes stewardship. The mountain needs stewardship. It doesn't need a continuing quarry operation, and every day it goes on creates just a little more destruction. We're here to stop destruction.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Michelle Salmon and Philip Batchelder. They are opposed to Measure B.
Philip said I should keep this last part light, but I don't think that I can. Recently, I attended a meeting of the Wallaby Watershed, and while presenting an overview to the citizens of Brisbane, Cliff Lenz, one of our planning commissioners, said, and miraculously, the lagoon was not filled. And I thought, miraculously? Yes, it was a miracle. It was a miracle made by the people of Brisbane. When they finally stopped filling the lagoon, it was a little better than a cesspool, and some thought, oh please, just go ahead, finish filling it, cover it over, it's a blight. It was a disgusting pond and scum pond and cesspool, and it was a health hazard. That's hard to imagine today when you see all the wildlife, the herons, the egrets, and even the ever so fussy pelican thrive in our lagoon. When you see the reflection of the sunset or the moon rising over the glassy water and think, oh, how beautiful. And that we almost lost this. Looking now at the scarred and ragged quarry, I know that it's hard to ever imagine the benches softening and the land restoring itself. But it is already happening, people. The mountain is trying to heal itself just as the lagoon did. We need to give it a chance. The birds soar over the quarry benches, and the little sedum creeps down the rocks, and the little animals scurry across. I took out the pictures of the scat because it's public. But the quarry is the very heart of the habitat range, and it needs our help. Brisbane has protected so much against a rising tide of urbanization, and this needs protection too for future generations. For the butterflies, yes, but for each and every one of you and your children and your children's children, for our own species' survival. Thank you all very much for coming tonight. It is important to know the facts and fully understand the importance of the decision that you are going to make on November 7th. I firmly believe that the quarry will cease operations within 5 years without housing. I have waited 50 years, and I can wait another few if that's what it takes. The site is depleted for all practical purposes, and don't think otherwise. They have ignored the conditions of their current permit, and we will make certain that they do not get another. In the meanwhile, we will enforce the safety conditions and reclamation agreement that is already in place and is a condition of operation. Our group represents the community of Brisbane. We have supported longtime residents and new residents and rich residents and central Brisbane residents. You, our grassroots campaign is you, the people of Brisbane. Their group is trying to find an easy way to make a profit and make us pay for the damage that they did to the mountain. They have failed to fulfill their obligations thus far and commitments both in operating the quarry and in the reclamation of the land. The $7 million that they are offering up will not begin to cover the cost to Brisbane. They have not adequately addressed the safety concerns. In their own reclamation plan that was updated in 1987, they stated that the existing orientation of the site toward industrial use and minimal human exposure to possible residual hazards of the steep quarry slopes that would occur. And the disadvantages of this alternative are the potential safety problems for members of the general public trying to walk or climb on the steep quarry slopes and the public cost for park improvements and maintenance. Former quarry owners had some sense of responsibility, but it would seem that the current family owners in Sandpoint, Idaho, are only interested in profit and could care less what happens in Brisbane or on San Bruno Mountain once they have their money. And they are willing to spend $75,000 from outside sources just to get you to vote yes. Look at their campaign statement. Do not be misled. Housing is not the way to stop quarry operations. This plan is as flawed and fractured as the quarry slopes themselves. Building housing is a violation of basic common sense, and only those who would seek to profit by it would do such a thing. Protect our own town and our mountain from these outside interests and profiteers. Instead, imagine, just imagine and dare to dream about a restored habitat, conservation of our water resources, and healing the heart of the mountain. Close the quarry? Absolutely close the quarry, but not at this cost and not with housing. How you vote on November 7th will make a difference 100 years from now, so choose wisely and vote no.
I might add really quickly that please listen to what Mr. Poole has said about, we can alter the reclamation plan, whatever we want. The reclamation plan is the housing plan. It's not settled. You don't even know what you're going to be voting for. That's pretty serious. You don't even know what you're going to be voting for. And really dare to have a different vision. Thank you.
Idea of what Measure B is all about. Just a reminder, tomorrow is the last day to register to vote in this election. So you do need to register if you haven't yet. Please check your voter pamphlets. Be sure to get out and vote on November 7th or vote by absentee ballot. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would like to thank you all for coming this evening. Have a nice night. Thank you.